the first thing I would want to do is make sure we have our ring so our talent does not potentially get hurt.
The big debate, and it's AEW Grand Slam, Brisbane, Australia, aka AEW Collision, because that's ended up what it ended up being, is that AEW used a smaller ring for the big show. They use a 20 by 20 ring usually, or nearly always. They have used 18 by 18 a few times on TV, I think, over the years. But that being said, Tony Khan never arranged a 20 by 20 ring to be shipped over, and there were no 20 by 20 rings locally. So, did you notice it when you saw Grand Slam or clips of Grand Slam? Did you notice the ring looked different just immediately?
A little bit. Where I noticed it now in hindsight was those really long arena crowd shots where it looked really good. The building looked really good. The TV looked really good. The ring looked exceptionally small from that. On the hard camera, I couldn't really tell, except it seemed like, because I guess the building and where you put a hard camera, usually above level in the ring, like not apron level, but it seemed like it was a little bit off, either, I believe, lower than it usually is. Did you feel that way? And that kind of
looked like it was dipping slightly. I know what you mean.
Yeah. Usually you have to pick an exact point to put the hard camera, and then obviously the camera people and some of the production. And usually that's tarped off or nobody can sit there. But it's usually always a little above eye level where you can see over the top rope into the ring. This felt lower. I gotta look back at it, but it felt like it was lower, which gave me another clue that it wasn't the same exact ring. Now, this whole thing, you've talked about the ticket controversy. You talked about all the stuff with promoting it as a pay-per-view or a TV and the confusion for months over that. This has to be one of the first things you should do, because this is the number one safety factor. And Jeff, I'm not clutching my pearls or anything. I'm just saying the first thing I would want to do is make sure we have our ring so our talent does not potentially get hurt. That's it.
And you don't know if you're borrowing a ring as well. You can't guarantee the safety of it or how it's made, I guess, as well. That's something else I want to ask you about.
That is the most terrifying thing about working like indies from town to town. Unless you're traveling with WWE, AEW, TNA back in the day with Memphis or anything, you are traveling with the same ring usually because you're always in a loop. But when you have something like this and you're counting on somebody in the area or the country to have your size ring, much less a ring that's been vetted, a ring that's been inspected, the boards are good, the canvas is good, the ring posts aren't going to sag in a little bit. You pointed that out a little bit. It's not going to quite be there. Even the under part of the ring where you tie the metal cabling to the ring post to make sure they stay upright, you can't take any chance with this. Now, Tony Khan could have bought a ring and had it shipped to Australia, or bought a ring or had it made over there in Australia and just left it there. I think WWE does that. They have warehouses where the rings are in Europe or the UK or the West Coast. They get picked up and they get brought to the building. I may be off base with that. But internationally, WWE for a fact has rings pretty much in every country, and it's their ring.
Now, at first I thought it was a 16 by 16 ring. It was 18 by 18. QT Marshall sort of clarified that on his Twitter. And the other thing was, I also wanted to make mention of, and I'm sure you've got very many opinions on this, is how bouncy the ring was compared to a regular 20 by 20 ring that we see in AEW or WWE. Is bouncy always better? Is it bouncy always safer to take bumps on?
Bouncy in theory. This is where, over time, I'm sort of coming back to the middle where I'm not quite sure, because when I would I bumped in the WrestleMania 3 ring when I worked in independent up in Wisconsin. As a matter of fact, Kevin Nash would refuse to powerbomb me because it was that stiff. Like to the point where he was walking on it and felt it in his knees and hips and stuff like that. So you would say, oh, the bouncy ring's great. It's like a mattress, or it's like a trampoline or whatever. But you run the risk that we talk about many, many times, and we're going to talk about Dakota Kai later, when she got knocked out from the Zoe Stark drop kick, the ring bit her and bounced up. That's usually like the worst thing that happens with the ring being bouncier. So I'm sort of in the middle. I'd obviously not like the WrestleMania 3 ring or the old WWF rings. They're like Formica, like a countertop. But I would like it to have some sort of durability. Now, when it bounces that much, the first thing I would look at being the ring crew is, and you start to see those posts kind of go in a little bit, I would be very worried about things happening, as far as the ring collapsing or stuff like that.
With the 18 by 18 rings, right? Loads of people used 18 by 18, TNA and ECW and da-da-da-da-da. But the thing is that, especially WCW, for me, even as a teenager, I knew there was something a bit B-show about WCW, and I think it was probably the ring more than anything else, especially when, as you mentioned, Kevin Nash or your Hogans, your Giants, your Lugers, your Stings, everyone was so huge in WCW, they just almost swallowed up, all the space in the ring. And I remember even when they filmed it, they always used to have someone in one of the corners on the apron sort of shooting downwards for quite a lot of the shots, quite a lot of the years. And it always made the ring look so small. So maybe I'm a bit more in tune with spotting smaller rings, whereas AEW, they can get away with it a bit more because on average, the main event players are smaller in size as well. So it's not quite as pronounced, I guess, a size difference. But once again, is this something that you just spotted immediately? And did it bug you, the size difference?
No, it didn't bug me. I was just happy to see that it looked like a mostly full house with all the drama that everybody had to put up with, and especially the talent flying all the way over. It's got to be what? A full day of travel, like a literally 24-hour day of travel. And for them to fly over, and if it was half empty or a quarter full or whatever, that's not, you went all that way to do that. So when I saw the house was mostly full, I was pretty happy about that. The smaller rings, and that WCW point you made up, it's in theory, having the cameraman in that corner is like, I remember Hogan was beating up Vader and slapping him, and they had that cameraman right there. They looked like they were in a toy ring because they were so tall and so big, and it was shot down that the ring looked like, it was literally looked like the video game Q*bert, where you have like the tiles straight down. And it's not a great analogy, but you know what I'm saying? It was like some kind of forced perspective.
Yeah, it was like a fisheye lens as well, or at least it came across like that because it was so close. I don't know.
I think because they were so big and the ring was so like low underneath them and everything that it just made it look like we're having technical difficulties all over the place and the microphone and everything.
The place up.
But it did not stick out to me. It stuck out to me in WCW, obviously, and I went from ECW to WCW, and it still felt a little different, even though both rings were 18 by 18 rings. I've wrestled in 16 by 16. After WWE, you can't exist in a 16 by 16. It was hard because I always felt like my head was going to hit the ropes from bumping backwards. And that's when you have bigger guys that are in the ring. And AEW's lucky they didn't have like that Indian guy that's what was with Jay Lethal and Sanjay Dutt. What if he had to take a back bump in the ring? He would probably hit the ropes because he's so used to the extra 2 feet, 2 by 2. Then WWE being, 20 by 20 as well, gives you that room. So we did the secrets of the ring before. We can do like the differences again and what you have. But if you were to ask me today, I would prefer not a bouncy ring, and I would prefer 20 by 20 just to have room to work.
Yeah, in fact, that pretty much was what I was going to ask you, but I'll sort of leave that there for a second. Did you find that in an 18 by 18 ring, and especially with AEW, with how many people do high flying and just quick matches, basically, speeding through the moves, is it just a lot easier in an 18 by 18 ring because, hitting your ropes constantly, doing dives and stuff? Does that, taking out the extra step, that extra 2 feet, help you?
Yeah, but if you take out the extra step and you're used to the extra step, now your timing is completely off on both ends. In other words, when you go from an 18-foot ring to a 20-foot from, say, ECW, WCW to WWE, I had to get in the ring a few times, and you had an extra step to a step and a half, depending upon how tall you are, how long your legs are. going from that to a smaller thing, think about it. I just said it about the big Indian guy. What if you're taking a springboard drop kick or you're doing something and you're supposed to go through the ropes or something, but you find you don't have that extra step to tumble through the ropes and you find yourself like halfway hitting your hip against the rope and you haven't, you know what I mean? You're expecting to be drop kicked, knocked back a step or two, and then tumble through and hook the middle rope. Throws everything off, catching a cross body, dropping an elbow, doing a moonsault, positioning a guy or a girl where you think they need to be like a little bit in from a 20-foot ring and you overshoot them by a foot. These are real adjustments. And that's why I said the number one thing you had to do when booking Australia or anywhere else where you don't have access to drive the ring on a tractor trailer to the building, you ship that ring, you buy a dedicated ring that stays over there. That's got to be number one. And I don't know what the chain of command or what the management is on that side of the logistics for AEW, but whoever it is, you have to think of that. And it should be Tony Khan, number one, or Bryan Danielson still kind of in the office and Tony's right-hand man, right?
I'm not sure he's going physically to any offices, but I suspect he's one of his advisors, yeah.
All I'm saying is if a worker who's like really conscientious of making sure that they have everything they need, the number one thing you need is the ring. And I can also tell stories here or on Patreon, separate episodes about how we work shows when the ring didn't show up. Because there's been plenty.